Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our top 10 list here on Every Day is a Story All Its Own. Well, we just finished up the cycle of the 3 threes of good storytelling, and I'm really happy to hear from a lot of you that you've been using them already in your writing, you're finding them valuable. And so today's top 10 is going to be the top 10 foundational books that I think are really important so you can elevate your game in narrative and storytelling. These are books that I use in all my classes, all of my workshops, and books that I go to time and time again when I'm doing my own writing. So I hope you enjoy. Let's get ready to start building your learning library for storytelling. Okay, well, let's get started. The first book on the list is one that I've talked about a bunch on this show already and probably will continue to, and that's Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces. Now, Campbell went on to be a comparative mythologist, an author, a teacher for a very long time, and really changed a lot of things with how we looked at mythology and storytelling. Well, in this book, of course, he does the separation, the initiation, the return, and he breaks them down into 12 steps that go along with each one of those. And as we continue this series, I'll be looking at each one of those steps much more closely than we have in the past. Well, anyway, he had some time during the Great Depression, and what he did is he studied all the great myths of the world, exhaustively reading everything he could get his hands on, and he realized that there was something that he called a monomyth. They all had something in common. And from there, he went on to devise what was called the hero's journey. Now, the second book on the list is a companion volume to this. Fast forward several decades, and there's a man named Christopher Vogler who's working at Disney. He's working on The Lion King, and they're having some problems getting the story to come into focus. Well, he's reading Joseph Campbell's work. He goes on to write a book called The Writer's Journey, Mythic Structure for Writers, where he breaks all of this down much more directly in terms of storytelling. And I do encourage you to read that book, read it in conjunction with the Campbell book, and I think you'll really understand why I value this system so much. Well, the third book on the list is another one that I've talked about a lot, and this is David Mamet's 3 Uses of the Knife. What's really important for Mamet's book is how he breaks down the second act, which of course, as we've talked about, can be very thorny because it's long, it's complicated, and it's really easy to get lost. Well, Mamet gives us a lot of ideas on what we should be doing with the hero, his movement or her movement towards the lie, away from the lie, to the truth, the allies that are coming into play to help, the enemies that are preventing the growth, the accomplishing of the obstacle. Now, also, too, when you go back to Vogler, he takes the second part of the hero's journey, which is the initiation typically, and he turns it into the descent and the initiation. So using Mamet, using Vogler, you can really get a handle on how the 3-act structure works. Now, the fourth book on the list and the fifth book on the list are both foundational screenwriting books. If you're gonna write a screenplay, you need to read these 2 books. The first is Robert McKee's Story, and the second is Sid Field's Screenplay. Now, McKee talks about the gap between what you want and what you have, and the journey that evolves from that. Both of them look at the 3-act structure. They're both talking about 14 scenes, 28 scenes, 14 scenes as you go through Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, at least in a first draft, at least in an outline where you're starting out. Well, the 6th book on the list is Adventures in the Screen Trade by William Goldman. And Goldman's book is an awesome collection of anecdotal stories about his process in writing his different famous films, how he got into screenwriting because an actor thought that an outline for a short story he had was some kind of avant-garde way to write a screenplay. And he went on to accomplish great things because he understood that screenwriting, that story, is structure. Now try to get the edition of the book where it also includes the full screenplay of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, so you can really see how Goldman applies all his wisdom practically into just a classic of Hollywood films. Moving on, another book that is a mixture of autobiography and technical writing advice that is no BS, straight from the heart, and it's Stephen King's On Writing. Now, King has written short stories, he's written novels, and he's also written screenplays and teleplays. So this is another guy that pulls wisdom from a lot of different genres, a lot of different styles of storytelling. And what's really, really valuable, I think, is two things here. If you're a fan of Stephen King, then you're going to love how his life really informed his work. There are a lot of really kind of dark revelations in the book, but also he talks about the fundamentals of writing, outlining what the process of outlining is. He has some great metaphors for it, and also being hard on yourself when it comes to the editing, getting rid of what isn't needed. It's super, super valuable. It's a great way to not become attached and fall in love with your writing. So many writers have a hard time when they say, nope, this has to come out. Oh, it's my best idea. We'll put it on an index card and leave it for a different project. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and let it go. All right, so the next book on the list is from a playwright, and it's called Theory and Technique of Playwriting by John Howard Lawson. Now, Lawson also did screenplays. Lawson was writing in the 1930s. It was a time of a lot of social upheaval in America. He was very closely aligned with Harold Clurman in the group theater, which I'll be talking a lot about on this channel, and he wrote a lot of plays that really moved a lot of people. This book, Theory and Technique of Playwriting, absolutely foundational if you're going to write plays. I think it's also helpful to screenwriters as well, TV writers. A lot of good information in there. Now, another book on playwriting is Bernard Grabonnier's book by that title, Playwriting. Grabonnier was not a writer, and so I really wanted to include this book in the list. He was a critic. He was a professor of English. His scholarship and the way he taught Shakespeare is foundational and really, really important to understanding Shakespeare. So Grabonnier is a guy that you really want to know, and that is the only book on the list that I'm sharing with you today that's hard to get. You can get used copies. It's from the 1960s. It's not currently in print, but it's definitely worth finding, borrowing, going to a library, interlibrary loan, however you can get your hands on it, because it'll be well worth the time and effort. Now, the last book on the list is Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics. This is a book I was introduced to about 4 years ago when I was taking a writer's workshop at a state writing conference where I was presenting, and a screenwriter director that I really admired mentioned this book. Now, he also writes graphic novels, and it's a great way to understand the visual layout of story, whether you're making films or television shows or not, the visual components, what's there. As a director for the stage, it's great for mise-en-scene, it's great for blocking and composition, supporting the story with the picture that you create. There's also great information on the difference between Western and Eastern storytelling, which I found absolutely fascinating. If you're inclined to use a lot of backstory to slow your narrative down and really give us a glimpse into what the characters have gone through in the past that brought them to the present, then this is going to be really helpful for you in doing it well. There's also a lot on story mechanics in this book. So I moved pretty quickly through this. Most of the books are self-explanatory about what they're about, and the real treasure is diving into them. So that's all I have for you on this top 10 list. Please continue to like the videos, subscribe, hit the little bell for the notification on subscription. Definitely now leave me comments. Let me know top 10 lists that you wanna have me share and talk about, different ideas. I would love that. Also, when you start reading these books, I would love to get into a dialogue with you about them, things that we can share with the viewers, things that we can talk about in the comments. So everyone, I hope your 2019 is off to a great start, that you're inspired, that you're creating, and we'll see you next time on the show. And remember, every day truly is a story all its own.